morning. I'd like to welcome you to the Emerging Leaders Conference. My name is Beckham, and I'm excited to be your first speaker today to talk to you about leadership. And having been a leader now for about 45 years, I've led organizations as large as 1,000 people and organizations as small as 26. So I know a little bit about leadership, and I'm very excited that you as students are interested in leadership. And I want to challenge you today along the topic of the leadership lift. One of the most well-known and respected teachers on leadership is author John Maxwell. He has written and published 26 best-selling books on leadership. He's a platinum-level writer. He has 30,000 coaches that study under his leadership program. And he says this about leadership. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. In other words, if you are influencing people, you're a leader. As one friend of mine said, how can you tell whether or not you're a leader? He said, if you turn around and look behind you, if nobody's following you, you're not a leader. You're just taking a walk. But if people are following you, then you have influence. If you're a leader, you have influence. People listen when you talk. People pay attention to what you do. People will even change their lives based on the things that you say and the ideas that they bring to them. I was discussing one of the leaders in our church with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about him in a positive way, and he made the statement. He said, whenever Alan talks in the meeting, everyone gets quiet. What was he saying? He was saying he has influence. People listen when he speaks. Great leaders have great influence. And I want to challenge all of you students today to think about your influence and how not only can you grow your influence, but how you can use your influence to impact other people, those around you. So how do you use your influence? How do you lift your leadership and make a greater impact in the area of leadership? Well, I want to give you 3 ideas. First, you need to lift yourself by thinking bigger. How can you think bigger about the world? Too many of us live our lives with limiting beliefs. Most people don't live the lives they want to lead. They accept the life they're given. I want to challenge you to do just the opposite. Don't just accept where you are in life, but decide to lift your leadership. Sometimes we have limiting beliefs. For instance, you may be coming into this, maybe you're a freshman, maybe you're a junior, maybe you're about to head off to college next year. And sometimes it's easy for us to kind of get a limiting attitude. We might say statements to ourselves like, well, I'm just a student, or I'm just a freshman, or I'm just average, or maybe my goal when I head off to college will be to just blend in, or maybe my goal for this year of high school is just to get through the year. I want to challenge you to lift your leadership by thinking bigger. When you say, well, I'm just a freshman, you have to remember that every great person who's made a success was just a freshman at one point in their career. Just because you're a freshman or you're early in your academic career or any other part of your life doesn't mean you shouldn't think bigger. I want to challenge those limiting beliefs and get you to think of some expansive beliefs. For instance, how about if you change those limiting beliefs to these kind of thoughts? I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to help someone. I'm going to become more than I am now. I'm going to be somebody that makes a difference. One way this happens is because somebody sees leadership in us. I never will forget being in junior high school and being in an organization where it had a lot of prominent leaders. And as I was standing in the back of the room one day and a speaker was finishing up, my junior high teacher, her name was Elizabeth Wolfenbarger, came up to me and she said, Kim, you can be a leader someday. You have ability. I see other people listening to you. I was just 14 years old, maybe 13. And I remember that struck me as never had thought about that before. But you know what? It was a spark. It was a spark that has led to the changes that have put me in positions of leadership for my whole life. I hope you have a Mrs. Wolfenbarger in your life to give you a more expansive belief about yourself. One of my favorite stories about this is the speaker Les Brown. He is one of the most well-known motivational speakers in the country. And he tells the story about being raised in very difficult circumstances in an inner city. I think it was Miami, Florida, a very difficult place. But he was having a very hard time. He didn't have a good home life. He didn't have a lot of the things that some students have. And so therefore, he wasn't doing well in school. And the school, not really understanding them, had put him in a label on him. They had told him that he was educationally slow, and they put him in classes that were beneath him, but he didn't know how to protest that as a young person. And one day he walked by the classroom of a very prominent teacher in the school named Mr. Williams. And Mr. Williams was teaching, and he said everybody respected him because he always spoke with such skill and with such a beautiful voice, and he always challenged the students. And he said, I slipped into the back of the classroom. And he said, as he taught the lesson, he made this statement. He said, there's greatness in this room. I can feel it. Somebody's here today that's going to be great. I can feel you. There's greatness in this room. And he said something struck a chord within him. And he said later when the class was over, I kind of sidled up to Mr. Williams and I pulled on the side of his coat. And he turned around and looked at me. And I said to him, Mr. Williams? And he said, what? I said, Les Brown said, it's me. It's me. I'm the one you're talking about. Mr. Williams said, well then, son, go manifest your greatness. Well, he went on to do that. It would be years before he would find himself. But he was the kind of speaker that would speak in stadiums and thousands of people would listen. And it all started with Mr. Williams saying, there's greatness in this room. So the first thing you need to do is lift yourself by thinking bigger. The second thing you can do to use your influence as a student is to think, you can lift the organization you're a part of by thinking broader. Sometimes we focus on the limited areas of our life. I've heard someone say, you can focus on the depth of your life and God will focus and expand its breadth. But I want to challenge that a little bit and say sometimes we need to think about the breadth of our life. And I want to give you two areas. In other words, don't think of yourself as just a student who's attending a high school or university, but rather realize that you have a broader opportunity for impact. And I have two words for you. The first word is connection. As you enter into this new school year, think about the fact that you are connected to people beyond your campus. You know, I happen to be a member of some leadership organizations in Tyler, and I was in a big meeting last night that included leaders from all areas of the city, including our state senator. And he was talking about, you know what they were talking about? They were talking about education. They were talking about our campuses. They were talking about the resources of our young people. Do you realize that people whose houses you drive by every day and businesses you drive by every day think you're important? How do you know they think you're important? Because they continually pass bond issues that pay for the schools you go to and pay for your teachers because they understand something. They understand that they're connected to you. They never met you, they've never seen you, but they know that you have potential, that they know that you're going to make an impact on your community. Well, if they feel connected to you, shouldn't you feel connected to them? Shouldn't you realize that as you drive by their place of business, as you drive by those homes, as you pass by those hundreds of cars, that what you do in school this year and what you do with your career when you finish your school years is going to make an impact on other people? You see, what you do here, what you learn here matters to people you haven't even yet met. So think of the word connection. The second idea is that we need to understand the word conscience. We need to understand that even as a student, we would encourage you. This is, after all, the Emerging Leaders Conference put on by the Ethics Council. We want you to think about moral issues. We want you to understand that even as a student, you should have a sense of right and wrong. You should have a moral sense. So I'm just a student, but students have great impact. If you study your history, it's students that have made great difference in our societies. When I was a young person in the 1960s and 70s in high school, some of the most powerful leadership changes that happened in our country were led by young people not much older than you. Whether you agree with the Vietnam War or not, the fact that the Vietnam War was brought to a close when it was had a great deal to do with college students who decided that they didn't approve of this and their moral outrage led them to protest, which hastened the end of the war. Now, my point is simply this. Students can make a difference. What you believe and what you see as right and wrong, you shouldn't just go and say, well, that's the way the world is. No, I want to challenge you to lift your leadership by lifting your organization and thinking broader. Think outside the world of the campus that you're a part of. And the third and final area where we can lift people is to lift others by thinking better. You know, we need to challenge our thoughts, not just accept that what we see is what is there. Two areas in this. First of all, you need to refuse to accept first impressions. You know, sometimes the people that we meet and we see them, they don't look like much to us, but they can become very powerful individuals. Within each human being is so much greatness and so much opportunity. So as you enter into your new school years, realize that every student is important. Every teacher has something to teach you, and you yourself have an opportunity to make a powerful impression on others. So refuse to accept the few negative first impressions that you have, but try to look deeper at the person you're thinking about. Second, push back against your assumptions. We make assumptions about people. We say, well, this is just the way they are. Or this person doesn't like people like me. Or this teacher has a very negative attitude. You know, we make assumptions. And so many of those assumptions can be destroyed when we start having conversations with people. When we sit down with people and say, tell me where you're coming from. Tell me what your experience has been. Tell me what's important to you. Tell me how I can encourage you and help you. You know, when I was a very young person, I remember hearing the story of a young man by the name of Randy. Randy was in high school at the time when there was major problems in his community. And to try to combat some of these problems, the country had entered into the era of busing. And he found himself bused to a school outside of his normal district. And when he got there, he was the only person of his ethnicity in that campus. Now, it could have been very intimidating to him. He could have been frightened, or he could have thought this is going to be a terrible year. But Randy had something different within him. He decided to push back on his assumptions. And you know, after a short amount of time, using a strategy I'll tell you about in a moment, he began to make friends. And after he began to make friends, he not only just made friends, but he began to become popular. And eventually, he was elected the president of his class. And when he finished those years in that high school, he was the one voted most likely to succeed and most popular, and he had a tremendous school experience. Now, what was Randy's strategy? Even though he was the lone person and feeling like he could have had a sense of pity and said, I'm the only one like me here, what was his strategy? He said, you know, I looked around and I saw the kids in the lunchroom that nobody was talking to, and I made it a point to make those people my friends. And I made friends with them. And he said, then that led to other friendships. And that led to other friendships. And for long, my school year was going great. And I continued to grow my influence. That's the power of pushing back on your assumptions. Listen, make a difference. Lift your leadership by lifting others by thinking better thoughts. So as I bring this to a close today, students, here's the challenge. Here's a challenge to your leadership. You need to think bigger. Ask yourself as you enter this new year, are you the one? Is greatness in you? Then you need to think broader. How can I impact outside my campus? How can I learn things, meet people, build relationships that will make an impact in the community? And finally, think better. Who can you lift higher? Look around you. Who could use your encouragement? Who could use your friendship? And who can you be an example to? So as you finish out your Emerging Leaders Conference, may it be the catalyst to growth in your life. I look forward to hearing the successes in your life and knowing how you grew your leadership. Have a great year.